Hi, it's Chris from the Quilter's Nook here in Versailles, Indiana, and we are ready for another Studio 180 Technique Day. And today we're going to work on the shaded 4-patch. And the shaded 4-patch is this little block right here. And you may have seen this a lot in magazines and other patterns, and they ask you to make a square, 2 quarter triangles, and a half square triangle. And they want you to sew it all together perfect, and it's gonna line up just perfect, but not in my world. So we're gonna use the Studio 180 Tucker trimmer, and we're gonna make this out of strip sets. Okay, so first thing we have to do is decide on our size, and I'm gonna stick with the 4.5 inch cut or 4 inch finished size. And my instructions on the technique sheet tell me I need a narrow strip and a wide strip. So I've got those cut. So as you can see here, my narrow strip will be my square, and my wide strip is going to be my quarter square triangles. We also have our gold rectangle that we have cut according to the size on our chart. So the first thing we're going to do is put our narrow strip on top of our wide strip, and you're just going to sew a nice 1/4 inch. When you press, we're going to press to the white. So I press this towards the white so that our square, our small strip maintains a square, and you'll see that as we go along. So you always press to that wide strip. When we go to cut from here, we need to make 2 cuts that are the same size as our small strip set. And in my case, it was 2 3/4 inches. So I'm going to take my first choice ruler, and this is one of Deb's new rulers, and it's wonderful. And we're gonna do 2 3/4. And I like to line up a line in between the seam line right there, so it kind of keeps it all straight. 1 2 3/4, and I'm going to cut 2 of those. Two and 3/4, line up a line on the seam and cut. So these 2 pieces will give you 2 shaded 4-patch units. We're going to take one of them and put it on top of the other so that the blue strips are opposite, and they will not line up, okay? Because you've got a narrow strip and a wide strip, so you've got a gap in there. But we want to make sure that those are opposite. I like to put the blue on top so that when I run it through, the seam goes down and there's no chance of it popping up, going the wrong direction when it goes through my needle. So we're going to sew that nice 1/4 inch. And then you get this guy. We need to, if you can see this, there is a gap between the 2 seam allowances. We're going to cut somewhere in that gap. And if you want to, you can fold it in half. So you could have folded it in half and make a slit, and that slit's going to be right up to your seam line. Okay. Then we're going to go press. And as you can see, because we slit that, this side wants to get pressed this direction, this side's going to get pressed to that direction. Okay. And that's what we have here. They're all pressed nicely in their own direction so that we maintain that square, because we need that square to stay a square. Now our directions tell us we're going to draw some lines, because we are going to sew diagonally through these intersections. And a good way to do that is, again, with your first choice ruler. The edge of your first choice ruler in the center, this side comes straight, comes clear to the edge of the ruler. where this side comes 1/4 inch away. We're going to draw like we were using just a regular ruler, so we want to use what's right at the edge. And I'm going to take these 45-degree lines that are sitting on your ruler, and those are going to go on my seam lines. So I've kind of marked with a friction pen so you might be able to see a little bit better. I'm going to take the 45-degree lines and line them up right on my seam lines. So the intersection is right at the edge of the tool. And then we're going to mark our sewing line. Okay. Turn it around, and we're going to do the same thing. 1/4 inch line on our seam lines. Just like such, 1/4 inch, or a 45-degree rather, 45-degree on each of our seam lines. Mark our sewing lines, and that's all there is to that. So now we're going to take our rectangle that we've cut, put it right sides together with the unit we just marked. You're going to pin, and you're going to sew right on these lines. Now I'm going to give you a suggestion. You can start here near the corner, but a lot of machines don't like that little point starting through your machine. So if you'll start on this line that's just on the edge, your machine will like it a whole lot better. So you can sew down here, turn it around, and then sew down there. Your machine will just like it a little bit better. Once you have those sewn, now we're going to cut them apart. We're going to put a 1/4 inch line right on our sewing line because this seam allowance is big. So we're going to put a 1/4 inch right on our seam line and cut. Turn this one around. Put the 1/4 inch right on your seam line, or close to it, and cut. This is the only scrap that you have, so it's pretty cool. Now we're going to press, and we're going to press them toward the large triangle. So I put the large triangle up on top, flip it back, and I'm going to press. And we have nice shaded 4-patch units. So now we're going to trim them up. We're going to use our Tucker trimmer again, and we're going to trim this to 4.5 inches. I'm going to take the 4.5 inch sizing line, and he's going to go across our long seam. I'm going to pull it down so that our common diagonal hits that center of our blue. Doesn't matter where it is around here because we're going to trim all that off. But we want this lined up, and we want this to go right through that center. And then we're going to trim up one side, trim across, turn it around, take your 4.5 inch cleanup lines along the outside edge. Your 4.5 is still here, and your common diagonal is still going through the center of that square. Move that down, there we go. And we'll trim those two sides. And there you have a perfect shaded 4-patch unit. A whole lot easier than trying to make triangles and squares line up exactly. So that's our shaded 4-patch. Next week, we're going to do a shaded 9-patch. So stay tuned. It's just as much fun. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.